Well, thanks. Great to be here. We were just talking about how thrilled we are that ICC has made A Ghostly Shade of Pale required reading. They picked Ghostly for 2 years to be their contemporary novel, and we follow Neil White and in his book in the company of in Sanctuary of, what's that title? I can't remember. Anyway. That's right, Sanctuary of Outcasts. We follow that book, and that's an honor to follow him because that's a great book. So we were just talking about that, some of our experiences in schools, and the first time we got a call, jump around a little bit since we started talking about it. First time we got a call from a school early on when A Ghostly Shade of Pale had just come out. A teacher from Winston Academy in Louisville called. And she said, Mr. Temple, do you know that we're teaching your book in English classes down here all the way down to the 8th grade? And I said, no, really? I said, wow, that's great. And so she said, yeah, would you come speak? And I said, sure, I'd be glad to. And I was so excited. And I hung up the phone. My wife, Judy, was off in another room. I said, hey, Judy, you won't believe it. I said, they're teaching Ghostly in English classes all the way down to the 8th grade. And I went, oh, my English teachers are looking closely at my writing. You know, I could see the red pens coming out, you know, circling all that. I don't care how old you get, you never get over that fear. And then I've shared that with English teachers since then. They said, oh, Merle, that's so yesterday. They said, red ink is so judgmental. We use purple ink now. So what a world we live in. But when I made one of my first presentations at Nettleton to the Lions Club, Ghostly really wasn't even out yet. I told them it was coming, and that's where I went to high school. And we had an English teacher down there that everybody remembers in high school named Ms. L.B. Johnson. And she was tough and demanding. We didn't really appreciate her then, but later when we got to college and out in the world, we appreciated her, you know, because when a lot of other people were struggling and were in remedial English, you know, we were doing okay. But one of them came up later and after the talk and said, wouldn't Ms. LB be so proud to know that one of her students had become an author? And I said, yes, she would. She'd be so proud and so surprised it was me. And so we've had a lot of fun along the way, and Ghostly Shade of Pale is the first in a trilogy that came out. Ghostly came out just over 2 years ago. We had a kickoff down at Reed's Gumtree bookstore, and the experts, so-called, told us, they said, you're new, you've been gone from home a lot, you know, you're from here, we've been gone a long time, and new author, and we know the lay of the land, and they said, you know, maybe, you know, we know you're a perfectionist, but maybe 25, 30 books, you know, sometimes they don't even turn out for the big names here, you just never know. And I signed for 7 hours. We signed 235 books, and they'd never seen anything like it. Mr. Reed, Jack Reed Sr., he said, Merle, if everybody worked as hard as you do to market, get the word out, he said we'd all be in great shape. And a lot of authors, great people, but most authors I know are very shy by their nature, and they'd rather be off somewhere writing, and I would too, but I've been in the real world also, and I know you've got to get out and you've got to market, you've got to sell your product if you believe in it. And so I think that's been an edge for us, and the biggest edge we've had, of course, is just the blessings of God. I promised him that I would write these 3 books based on my life and tell my story and his story of redemption and how he never gave up on me, how he saved my life time and time again. And you know, sometimes when, you know, I couldn't find him and I wondered where he was, and it was always turned out he was right where I'd left him when I pushed him off at arm's length. And he wasn't lost, I was. And but he never gave up on me. The Hound of Heaven, as Malcolm Muggeridge called him. He was always back there in pursuit of me. And so he's opened doors that there's no other explanation for how some of this has occurred except the blessings of God. But we give him all the glory because this is a ministry to us. And so I'm having more fun probably than a 67-year-old probably should be allowed to have. And we just travel the country and meet the nicest people. But Ghostly came out, and Ghostly is drawn from, inspired by, and taken from my time when I left Ole Miss in the early 70s, and President Nixon had just declared the first war on drugs. And I decided naively and probably not too wisely that that must be the place for me. And so I went into that as a young undercover agent. There weren't many of us. So if you got in trouble, nobody was coming to rescue you because there really wasn't anybody to come rescue you. And so consequently, working solo undercover in South Mississippi in 1972, I was taken hostage by two heroin dealers who decided that they had a winning formula. Why sell me their product when they could just keep it, take my money, and kill me? And so it wound up out in the swamp it was like at midnight, and there was a little shack there. It looked like a scene out of every bad B-horror movie you've ever seen. And when I walked into that house with them, they pulled guns on me, and then began to debate where to dump my body once they'd kill me. And midst of all that too, the one across from me sat and looked at me eyeball to eyeball, and he pulled out Gillette razor blades, the old double-edged Gillette razor blades, and began to chew it and bit it in two. And you remember how sharp those things were? You cut the end of your finger off with one. And he bit it in two, chewed it, and swallowed it. And then blood just gushed out of his mouth, bubbled at the corner of his mouth, ran down on his throat. And he put his fingers in the back of his throat, pulled out a handful of blood, and asked me if I wanted some. I said, I don't believe I'd care for any. And then he got a whole box of long stem kitchen matches on a big flame, his face down over it, the blood flowing, and then swallowed that flame. And it's about that time my whole life flashed before my eyes. And it's true what they say that I think when you believe that you're really about to die, it releases something in you, some chemical reaction. And my life began to flash before my eyes in like a kaleidoscope of images. You know, some of it was very beautiful. It was things buried deep within my subconscious that I couldn't remember. I could see myself as a little toddler between my mother and daddy holding onto their hands, you know, things I couldn't consciously recall. And, but I wouldn't recommend the stimulus that it took to get there. I'm not recommending that. But, you know, a lot of prayers went up that night, and all of that's fictionalized in the book, if you all get the books. And then a year later, I was appointed to be a topside investigator. We were just beginning to form our structure and move out across the state. And I was up in Batesville working that whole area from the Delta all the way up to Memphis. And I investigated an organized crime stronghold in DeSoto County. I was just up there Sunday morning. I spoke at the Sunday morning service of a Baptist church up there and talked about all those days. And a lot of people up there remember some of the real people. And you know, a lot of late night meetings, you know, with some scary guys and some organized crime figures who thought that other organized crime figures had wronged them, and so they wanted to tell me and get revenge through me. And so they had this big syndicate set up. And if y'all ever saw the original Walking Tall movie, it was really very much like that. And matter of fact, some of the real people from McNairy County, Tennessee, had come down and were part of this syndicate, which included the Mafia and the Dixie Mafia, and then some other stray professional criminals, kind of an eclectic mix. And we hit them, and finally, after a long investigation, and we saw a lot of corruption, saw law enforcement officers who were helping them set up dice tables, and you know, the dice were loaded. They had juice machines in the wall, that's magnets, in their terminology, stop the dice. The beers were loaded with scopolamine, a drug used in childbirth back in those days. I don't know if it still is. And to jar the people to make them easier to cheat them and take everything they had when they came in there. And then the waitresses were dealing drugs table to table, and they also doubled as prostitutes to a place on the side. It's very much like walking tall. And so we hit them, and they weren't real happy. And I had an informant inside that organization, and she kept calling me and telling me. She said, "Merle, they're having meetings, I said, "What are they meeting about?" And she said, "Well, they're meeting to talk about pooling their money and who they're going to hire to kill you." And I said, "Oh, I was young." Jim Clemente at Criminal Minds in Hollywood later asked me, he said, "What were you thinking?" I said, "I was young, Jim. I thought I was going to live forever. We thought we were invincible, And I said, "Well, no." I told the informant, I said, "No, that's bad business. That's just anger." I said, "They hit a state police officer. I mean, there'd be no place for them to hide, believe me." And she said, "No, they're serious." And so one day I got a call from a guy in Memphis, and he said, "Well, y'all did a great job down there, but I think you missed some people." And he said, "I can give them to you." And I said, "Okay." And he wanted to meet. He didn't want to meet in Memphis. He only wanted to meet in DeSoto County, where they had political protection. The syndicate did. And then I said, finally I agreed. I said, "I'll meet you." He said, "Well, I know a little place out in the woods." I said, "No, we're not meeting out in the woods." I said, "I'll meet you at the Horn Lake exit on I-55. And there was nothing there then. It's not like now. I mean, everything you could ever want is walking distance there, but it wasn't like that then. All that was there then was an abandoned Gulf service station. And so I left to go meet him, and then my informant called the house right after I'd left on the way up there, and told my first wife, who's deceased now, said, "Is Merle in?" She said, "No, he's gone." And she didn't really know where I was going. She said, "He's just gone." And she said, "Get a hold of him and tell him it's a setup. They're going to kill him." And hung up. And then Susan didn't know where I was. She called the highway patrol, and my police radio had gone out. And she was frantic. And I was driving up there, and I began to get a bad feeling about it. So I pulled my gun out of my shoulder holster, put it underneath my belt, closed my jacket, and I got there. It was not one but two guys. It deteriorated quickly. They were armed, I was armed, and finally it just got down to open my coat, pull my gun, and said, "Let's get on with it." And all that's in the book. I won't tell you everything. But God was looking out for me, and I was promoted and became eventually the first captain over the north half of the state. And in 1976, right here in Tupelo, we had our office then in the old TNS building. For anybody who's my age and remembers that, when it was right by the post office. It's gone now, and I think the Methodists own all that. But that's where our office was, and we were doing a heroin deal in Columbus in late November of 1976. And the agents had bought from these dealers before, and they were going to do a buy-bust with them, a large amount of money and drugs. We couldn't let 10, 15,000 walk away. We could do a few hundred here, 1,000, but that amount of money. But we did that to draw out their backers, anybody who wouldn't trust them with that much product. And they were flooding the Golden Triangle area with high-grade heroin, trying to create an addict market on the state campus and what was MSCW then, is MUW now. And so we had that set up, and they were waiting on me in Starkville. I was leaving the office. I ran down to my car and jumped in my car. They were parked on the street right by the Federal Building. And I was in a hurry and running late as always. Put my hand on the gear shift, and when I did, spirit filled up my car. Wrapped all around me, all through me, all in me. I had never experienced anything like that in my life. And I wasn't walking closely with God then, so I really didn't know what was happening. And Roy spoke to me and said, "Go back and get the bulletproof vest." And then it was gone. And I would say, "What is that?" I was kind of terrified. I said, "What is that? I'm losing my mind. We don't have any reason to believe it's going to be more dangerous than usual." And The agents didn't like to wear the vests. They were hard to conceal, even though it was November and they'd have coats on. And the vests then didn't have armor in them. They only were nylon. They stopped maybe a 38, nothing above that. And I said, I'm just losing my mind. And I put my hand back on the gear shift, right back in the car, all around me, all through me. I was one, we were one. It was just so hard, even for a writer to describe, although I tried in the book. And it wasn't optional this time, so go back and get the vest. I went back, I said, okay. I went back and got the vest, met the agents. I said, I want y'all to wear these vests today. And I said, don't ask me why. And they finally agreed. I said, please, just don't ask me why. And we got over to Columbus, where we were going to do the deal. And I said, keep it downtown where we have buildings to hide behind, stay close on you. Because I was really worried. And they let it get away from them and went out into the country, south of town, down past the W, out way down and wove around on this big high road on a high embankment, the depressions on either side. Up here, a big railroad trestle, high railroad trestle, and a clump of pine trees right in front of that railroad trestle. And right behind it was a sniper with a high-powered rifle. The agents were up here. They were walking down the slope to do the deal. Some of us were on this side. I was with the chief of intelligence. We were listening to the body units, conversations cutting in and out. The other agents on the other side. And then we hear them talking, negotiating, then saying, yes, you're under arrest. And then all of a sudden we hear, ta-tow. And I looked at our best friend, the chief of intelligence, said, Claude, is that gunshots? And then other agents started screaming on the radio, Merle, they're taking fire. And we came across a levee, caught in the crossfire, everybody shooting everywhere, scared. Gun smoke just hanging over the whole scene, just floating over there. It was a dark day and rolling, darkest rolling clouds maybe I ever remembered, just blanketed everything like it's squeezing all the light from the earth. And that night came a freeze. Everything was a sheet of ice from Jackson to Corinth that night. And one agent was hit, a violator was wounded. And everybody was screaming on the radio, and the female agent said, Merle, I'm taking Jerry to the hospital, he's hit bad, and other agents were screaming and firing, and I finally told them to stop firing at shadows. And we finally secured the scene. The sniper had fled off into the swamp and had hidden his rifle out in some undergrowth where we later found it. And I left for the hospital because I knew I wanted to check on the agent that was wounded, on the agent the young female agent who had just shot her first person and seen her partner shot. I mean, real trauma. And I knew the violator they wounded would have to go there for treatment. So I went into the room and to the ER and arrested the violator there. She had shot him right through his wrist as he went in to draw his gun out. She shot him right through here. If they hadn't had his wrist here, she'd have shot him right in the 10 ring, as they say, as you qualify on your targets. And tried to comfort her, and then I went into the ER, and there was my friend Jerry, and they were cutting the clothes off of him in that white vest I had been sent back to get. That white vest was soaked crimson in blood. And the doctor said, hey, Merle, look at this. He said, one round hit him in the lower extremities, one sliced through his arm, and this one hit him right in the chest. And it penetrated the vest because the vest wasn't designed to stop a high-powered rifle. He said, but Merle, it took some of the punch out of it, and it deflected it. So when it punched through, it went in behind his right breast, skittered around the barrel of his rib cage, and popped out behind his left breast. He said if he hadn't had that vest on, taking out his heart and lungs, he'd been dead before he hit the ground. I still get chill bumps right now, and that was almost 40 years ago. And you could almost, as I told the church Sunday morning, you could almost feel and hear, the shuffle of angels' feet around us that day. And so many things happened there in the Bureau, and which formed the basis of A Ghostly Shade of Pale. And then the sequel, A Rented World, is out now and doing well, but Ghostly is, like I said, picked up by a lot of schools and ICC and a lot of schools. in Mississippi and Alabama, maybe a few other places. It's in libraries, county libraries, church libraries. Ghostly and Rennie World are favorites in Adrian Rogers' old church, Bellevue Baptist. They say they can't keep them checked in up there. And they told me, they said, one lady's 92, I think, and she said she refused to bring hers back. And she finally said, well, it's not that I'm refusing to bring it back. She said, I read it 3 times and I can't let go of it. And so they used them so much, I think finally the binding on Ghostly was coming apart, and they were trying to encase it and save it. And I said, oh no, we'll just send you new copies. I said, no, this is great. As many as you need, you just let me know. And so it's been like that, and God's been so good to us. And there were 2 people I wanted to meet before I died, and Chuck Colson was one, if y'all know Chuck. And Chuck, just so they were setting it up, he fell ill in his speech in North Carolina with his aneurysm and died later. And then the one I really wanted to meet, who I learned so much from, was Ravi Zacharias, the great Christian apologist, a great apologist of our time in the world. And Chuck used to say that, and everybody says that. He's a great defender of the faith and most brilliant man I have ever studied. And Lord said, no problem. So one day Margie Zacharias, his wife, called me from Atlanta. So I read Ghostly Shade of Pale. You must meet Ravi. He's coming in from a 225-day world tour. When can you come? I said, when do you want me there? And so Christmas before last, just a couple of days before Christmas, I went over and had a 2-hour private lunch with Ravi, which is unheard of. He is so busy and so in demand. And it's funny, he drove me to lunch. And it's really rare that you meet somebody that you put up on a pedestal, which you shouldn't, because we're all human, but you do. And it's rare that you meet somebody like that they don't kind of disappoint you when you finally get to meet them. You find out, well, they're human like we are, but he was everything I thought he was and more. He was the real deal, humble to be who he is. He drove me to lunch and would rush ahead of me each time to open my car door for me, modeling the servant image of Christ. So we're sitting there eating lunch. I told him, I said, Robbie, he said, Margie just loves your book. He said, I just got in, I hadn't time to read it yet. He said, but she just loved your book. She told me, he said, Robbie, Merle uses words like you do. I said, oh, no, can't go there. He's the master. I said, no, I appreciate it, but no. And I told him, I said, I got to confess something to you, Robbie. I said, when I first started studying you, I said, you made my head want to explode because he's so deep, but I learned so much from him, and a lot of it washes over into my books, and there's a quote from him in my second book, and a lot of influence. But book 2, A Rennie World, picks up where Ghostly leaves off, follows Michael out of the bureau. He said he has to leave like I did because he investigated a corrupt governor and all his people and things they were doing to the agency. We won that battle, but then they came after me and tried to taint me so they could come after me openly since the press liked me. And that's how they do. That's how powerful, corrupt people in government do. It's a standard operating procedure. And so went into the corporate world, they came calling, and then we into the world of high-level politics and campaigns. I was always very quixotic, wanted to save the world, and I forgot the world already had a savior, and it wasn't me, and got me into some difficulty. But all that is wrapped up into book 2, and writing book 3 now. Hopefully, hope to have it out by Christmas, but I'm not going to rush it. This was the last one in the trilogy, and it's very important. And but we hope to have it out, and then after that we'll see what the Lord wants me to do. But we've been so blessed. Jim Clemente, I knew somebody that knew him. He's a writer-producer at Criminal Minds in Hollywood, and they've been on TV for 10 years and very, very popular. And they sold a lot of books for us when the word got out that Criminal Minds had blessed A Ghostly Shade of Pale. And I set it out and asked him if he'd read it because I knew his cousin. And he said he would, and some time went by, and one day it was in the inbox. I saw the email. I was afraid to open it because I knew he was going to say, why'd you waste my time with this drivel? And I opened it and he said, I'm sorry it's taken so long. We've been filming and doing specials on the side. And he said, but I'm not quite done. He said, well, I just had to stop and tell you. He said, you're not only a great writer, you're a great writer of American literature. That's what this is, our big crime stories literature. And that's the way we wrote it, was as literature. Not another throwaway item in a throwaway world, but written in a like old books used to be, and something to honor all those people, that helped me along the way, and trying to honor the great authors in my pitiful way that I had read and who had moved me. And he said, come to Hollywood, I want to represent you. So we loaded up the Murano. We had so many books in that Murano, headed out on I-40. We had no bounce left in the springs. I told people on I-40 I'd hit a bump and just like clonk, clonk. There was no, I got a great ride in the car, but not on that trip. We had probably, 300 pounds or more, or 400 pounds of books and all of our stuff. And we went out west and we stayed out there in Hollywood for 2.5, 3 weeks. And just had fairy tale experiences and signed books for the cast of Criminal Minds, met them, for the cast of Major Crimes, spent off the closer, and they set up an insider TV show interview in Beverly Hills called Media Mayhem, and the lady there who interviewed me was a big entertainment lawyer and not a Christian, but a nice lady, and her brother created Mad Men on TV, and the young man, the associate producer who mic'd me and powdered my shiny head was Will Gibson, Merle's son. So I got to sign one for his daddy, and we signed one for Robert De Niro. But when we were going through Beverly Hills, driving there, Judy and I were gawking at all the iconic images around us, like two country bumpkins that we were. And I looked at Judy and I said, Judy, we are the Beverly Hillbillies. And so, it was just a fairy tale experience, and so much happened. I had dinner with the producers of Saving Private Ryan to talk about the book, and just so many things happened. And in the midst of that, KKLA had called me just before I left and said, I called them first. So people said, KKLA is the largest Christian radio station in America. You're a Christian, you should try to get on there. And they kind of snickered like that was really going to happen. And I said, and so I looked for a producer on their website, couldn't find one, just hit the drop down of host. Don't know why, I didn't know any of them. And the Holy Spirit just said, that's the one. When it dropped down, that was Frank Sontag. I didn't know he had the largest show on the largest station. Couldn't find a contact for him, said I bet they got a show page just for his show on Facebook. Hopped over, sure enough they did. I said, I'm gonna step out on faith here, and I sent a private message into the page, knowing that the on-air talent never looks at a Facebook page. They just don't. Producer, they do sometimes. And so I did it and went back to typing on my desk. About 15 minutes later, the private line on my desk rang. I picked it up and hear this voice says, Merle, this is Frank Sontag in Los Angeles. And I said, hello, Frank. He said, no, you don't understand. He said, you don't understand. I am never in the station this time of day. I was at home. Something would not let me go. Kept telling me to get up and go to the station hours early. He said, and I got here and that same something nothing would do, but I checked Facebook page. He said, Merle, you must understand, I never, ever, 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 ever look at the Facebook page, but I had to. I saw one message and I said, I must call this man right now. And I said, Frank, I said, I think this is a God thing. And he had me tell that show on the air. They gave me an hour drive time on this huge station at 5 to 6 to give my testimony, my story to Southern California. And 2 days later, we signed at Lifeway in the edge of LA. And people poured into the story, even though we were a brand new author, had to beg our way to get in to do a signing there, and 2,000 miles from home. But we signed more books there than anybody ever had at that store except Charles Stanley. He's been on TV for 60 years, and so it was kind of like that. We went to Las Vegas, after Hollywood, and one door was closed to us, and we thought we were going to one Barnes & Noble store. Long story, but they said no and backed out at the last minute. And another one opened up over here is where God wanted us to go, at the largest Barnes & Noble store in the metro area in Henderson. And we went in there, and we broke all records for an author signing there, even famous authors. And that was where the lady came in from the hotel where we were staying. She knew we were in signing books. She came, and she came in and found out that Judy was a cancer survivor. And she said, "We make prayer quilts." And she rushed out and said 60 other women, and we pray over them for cancer survivors. Rushed out, said, "I've got one," came back in to give it to Judy. Tears all around. Those pictures I took went viral on Facebook. That led to the forming of Judy's prayer quilt ministry, Calvary Baptist. It was a big article in the paper with them down there, and Judy, we just put it on Facebook last night, the latest prayer quilt, Roman road pattern and scriptures all leading down to the cross in the center. And Judy just took another one to a person who's battling cancer right now. And so all of that would never have happened if that door I wanted to go through so badly over here had not been closed to me. And I kept wanting to go, but no, I went over here, and that's what started that whole timeline. And so, I could just talk to y'all forever about things that have happened, and so many miracles that we've seen out on the road, people that write us, people that just send us private messages on Facebook who don't know us, and "Do you know we pray for you? Do you know my son read your book when he was in a deep valley of drug abuse?" And he'd call me every night and said, "Mama, this happened, Mama, that happened." A lady in Jackson posted up who had lost her husband, and she was talking about her grief, and she said, "But I was out on the interstate one day, and this gray van passed me. It looked like a van that Michael and Clay, the two central characters based on me and my best friend, that they would be doing surveillance in." And then she paused, and she said, "About my husband," she said, "I think I'm getting better. I haven't thought of him in maybe a half hour." That's the last line in Ghostly. And then she said, "I can't get that book out of my mind." And we get those all the time. And a soldier posted up the other day, going to the front, he had all of his gear, his camos, and all his backpacks and weapons, and all laid out. He said only the essentials headed to the front, stacked up right in front of him was Ghostly and Rennie Worrell in the picture that he's tagged us. So we get those all the time. And a lady was dying of cancer here in the hospital, and sent word through her family she wanted to meet Michael, the character based on me. So I went out to the hospital with her and sat with her for about 2 hours. We talked, and the light of Christ is pouring out of her, and lost all of her hair, but full of joy. And she knew it wasn't going to be long, and prayed with her. And not long after that, she died, and her family said she had your books were in the bed with her when we found her. I'm just so blessed to be able to still have my health, to be able to do this, to travel, and tell people about all I've been through, to warn them about the dangers and darkness in this world, and all that I have seen, all I have survived by the grace of God. And we're just blessed that people actually like the books, want to read them, and we get all these great notes. And I even got a note the other morning. I got up on the Facebook private message page is open, and the lady said, "I don't know if you remember me or not." She said, "You arrested my husband 40 years ago." And I said, "Uh-oh, this may not be a good one." And she said it was an operation such and such. And I hadn't thought about that in forever. And I said, "Sure, I remember," after I thought about it. And she said it was a tough time. And she said he had a lot of problems. And she said I was in nursing school, and they were about to kick me out of nursing school because they thought I was involved and it was going to bring bad press to the school. She said, "But you were so kind to me." And she said, "You called them and told them to leave me alone, that I was not involved, I was a good person." She said, "I went on to be a caring, good nurse to people for over 40 years. She said, I owe my life to you." And I can't tell you what a blessing it is to live long enough and God to love you so much, to bring you through so much, that he helps you hold on to hear things like that in this life. And so I just, we speak at churches and schools and civic clubs and having a great time. They're pitching Ghostly for a TV series now, and just let me know that even though they had to hold their nose and endorse it a little bit, some of them in Hollywood did, the lady on the TV show out there told her audience, she said, well, it's Christian. She said, but you got to get it. The writing's so good. And so they called the other day and said, we want to make this TV show stand out, not just be another cop drama. So we're going to cast the central character as a Christian in this day and time. I mean, what a miracle that would be. And plus, we've got another TV show in the works right now. Can't talk a lot about it yet, but after Jim came here and visited with us for 3 days, people were so nice to him in Mississippi. It was funny. He looked at me one day before he left, and he's from New York City and lives in LA. He said, Merle, people here are just not like they are in New York City and LA. I said, yeah, that's probably right. And so they were so impressed with the way they were treated here. And the governor came by to see him when we had a rehearsal for him and said he gave him the key to the city. And because he was a hero actually. He was with the FBI and he was a first responder at Ground Zero on 9/11. And he got cancer from it. And he is very lucky to still be alive, and probably his lifespan has probably been shortened. And so we've truly been blessed, but he called to say, we might cast it as a Christian in that. And this TV series, he called to say, we were trying to sell this TV series and we're going to base it in Mississippi. And he said, we want you to be the host and narrator of it. And so what a thrill that would be. And really the great thing is what a great thing would be for Mississippi, because it'll be a very positive show and everything. And so I'm just amazed, time and again, that God can use somebody as pitiful and frail as I am. But we're having a good time, meet the nicest people. Life is good. I sang songs with Morgan Freeman over at the Ground Zero Blues Club, sat at his table. He wanted to talk about the book, and he's got his own production company, and we had a good time, sang songs. I've got him recorded on my phone. He got up and sang a solo. He sang Al Green's Let's Stay Together. And he's good. He's a good singer. I didn't know he could sing. I think I'm going to put it up on YouTube and say Merle Temple presents Morgan Freeman's second career. And so just wonderful people we met. You got any questions about it? I've kind of rambled a little bit, but it's great to be here with y'all. See some people I know, familiar faces. Any questions about writing or everything? The book world? The book world wanted me to, early on, they said, well, this is pretty good when they read the manuscript, but they said, you just need some neon in it. And I said, neon? I said, how do you define neon? They sent me some of my writing back with just the worst profanity you could ever imagine sprinkled throughout it. And I said, no, I said, no, I can't do that. And of course they like graphic intimacy and all that, and they're formula driven. So at that time, vampires were real hot. And they said, vampires are hot, can you throw in some vampires? I said, no, I've met some pretty bad guys. Guys that ate razor blades might kind of close. But I said, no, I can't do that. And they said, oh, and you might not want to mention God. You may offend somebody. I said, let me see if I understand. Profanity good, sex good, vampires good, but God not good? And I said, no, I can't do any of that. I said, I'm writing this book to honor God, and if my mother or my English teacher were still alive, I want this book to be something they could read and I wouldn't be ashamed for them to see it. So we stuck to that, and people are just hungry for these books that don't pummel them with bad language and all that stuff. It's just good literature. And some guy in England told me, well, it's using this street language absolutely essential. I just finished editing a big gritty crime drama. It's absolutely essential. I said, I just finished writing a big gritty crime drama and Criminal Minds endorsed it. I said, no, it's not. And I said, what we write today, they're like epitaphs on our tombstone. I said, perhaps that's what you want to be remembered for. I just choose not to. And I said, it's just not necessary. And sometimes sometimes that stuff is just substituted for good writing. It's all it is, you know, and so if they don't like my writing, they can't accuse me of substituting that because it's not in there. They'll have to find something else to criticize me for, but we got a great review out of England. I posted up on Facebook yesterday, and they were very kind and very eloquent in their review. It was a great write-up. And they tweeted it out in this world we live in. They tweeted it to their followers all over the world, and other crime sites retweeted it. You know, and then you find out, you know, your books are, I saw on eBay, I looked, and there was a dealer in England and a dealer in Australia that both claimed to have 10 copies that were first editions, and they were auctioning them on eBay. How they got them, I have no idea. And people say, aren't you mad because you're not getting any royalties for that? I said, oh no, I'm just thrilled, you know, that the reach of the books are seeping out, and it still is. Even after 2 years, people are still discovering Ghostly, the first book. And so however it gets out there, you know, that just pleases us to no end, because we're just seeding these books wherever we go, kind of like the first disciples did when they went out to seed churches. And it's just a warning to people, and get great notes from young people, very young people from middle school or high school, college, you know, telling what the books meant to them, and they're sharing their personal experiences with me, their near-death experiences, and we're not ashamed to tell you all. A lot of times I get these notes and emails and real-time conversations with people on the computer, and I sit there at my desk and I cry. I do, I just cry, you know, and think about all I've been through and how he saved me, and I've lived to see all of this, and that people, you know, I had no idea if anybody was going to like the book or not outside my family, because writing a novel is hard. I'd written all my life, but the novels are a different thing. It's tough to speak in other voices in a big complex book with a lot of threads, to make it all come together in harmony, integrity at the end, and make sure you didn't mess up somebody's age from page 1 to page 400, and their associations, their nicknames, how they met, you know, and believe me, readers will catch that stuff. And so it's pretty tricky, but I worked on that first one a long time, and it's just been quite amazing. So I don't want to give away too much, because y'all haven't finished it yet, have you? No, okay. And so, but tell your instructor that I'd love to come out and speak to the class, you know, if she'd like me to. Come back out there again. Had a great time out there. Any questions y'all got? Yes.
Looking at now the past in hindsight compared to the prohibitionary era and the psychopharmaceuticals
Yeah.
that they're selling on TV.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Sure.
doctors and all, you know, FDA and all the problems, you know, Reagan with his deal, you know.
Yeah.
All that put together, plus the over 1.5 million people in prison for drug crimes and stuff like that. Do you really think that the war on drugs is successful?
I was just asked that in an interview yesterday that we just posted up, a new one, and I addressed that at length. One theme that runs through these books is trying to warn people about whatever issue it is. When government says, we're going to save you, what they really mean is we want more money, we want to build a big infrastructure. And it's really not about what they say. And I'll say the war on drugs today is as far removed from what we were doing as from light to darkness. As a person who worries about civil liberties and the Bill of Rights, which we weren't perfect, but we tried to be mindful of that in our day. They have powers now to do things. I don't believe you should ever invest in any human being. I really don't. We live in a fallen world, and I see things happening recently and now, and I see people in prison who should not be in prison. They're overcharged. The sentences are long and draconian. and they did away with parole at the federal level. And there are people now serving 15, 20, 25-year sentences or more who were just, minor players, but prosecutors were given all of that power. It was taken away from federal judges. And so the prosecutors now have all that power with the U.S. attorneys. And anybody who's dealt with U.S. attorneys knows that's a dangerous thing. And so they just keep charging people over and over in this big book called the Sentencing Guidelines. And there's no room for grace. There's no room for background. There's no room for anything except what the book says. That is their Bible. It's not the Bible, but that is the sentencing guidelines. Even the people who wrote the sentencing guidelines said it was the biggest mistake they ever did. And so there's so much potential for abuse when you vest all of that power, and a lot of unintended consequences came out of it. So, it's all the money's been spent, for enforcement. Not to say that drugs aren't bad, they certainly are, but you have to step back and look at it. And I just submitted testimony. They've got a Chuck Colson. I was so thrilled. They named a reform commission chartered by Congress on prison reform at the federal prison level, and named it after Chuck, and I just submitted testimony to that, and I addressed a lot of that in there, and talked to one of my friends who's down at Mississippi College now, and a librarian down there, and she said, Merle, you ever think about all the good we could have done back in those days if we had really known Christ then? I said, oh, it haunts me. We did a lot of good too on the side, and people who are alive today wouldn't have been alive then. And I try to honor all of my friends in the book, but also I sound this warning about government, about central government. When you put that much power in there, like now, a federal agent can now just arrest you. Period. No probable cause. If he or she thinks that you have told them a lie about anything, they can arrest you with no probable cause, no evidence, and hold you for investigation. And they said we needed that power to fight terrorism. And when they tell you we need that power for terrorism, for organized crime, what they do is they take it and they turn it on me and you. And that's a very real danger. It's a very slippery slope. And it's like Franklin warned us back in the founding days, said he who would trade liberty for security may soon find he has neither. And I think the war on drugs has been perverted and used by manipulators, and the manipulators are all around. That's a long, convoluted answer to your question, but yeah, I don't think it's been a success at all, because as I told people, we thought in those days if we got a little bit better and our intelligence was better and we took out this biggest organization we knew of, smuggling organization, then everything would be good. But the moment we took them out, 5 more sprang up to fill that void. When there's all of that money to be made, somebody's going to fill that void. And so you knocked it out in Mexico, it moves to Bogota.
It arrested a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, it's my third book I'm writing now, Made Man in the Mafia, told me once, he said, I got in trouble, I had an aviation problem. He said, yeah, I was loaded down with cocaine in my DC-10 or whatever. And he said, the military jets pulled up beside me, aimed their cannons at me and said, so like I say, it's just my original director of the Bureau, who founded the Bureau of Narcotics, he said it was like trying to dam up the Mississippi River with a shovel. And that's a good analogy as I can think of, because it really is. It's just impossible to stop it. Even if you suspended all civil liberties, and gave absolutely dictatorial power, it would still get in, because as long as that money is to be made, somebody's going to take the risk, no matter how high the risk is. And as one time in my young life, I didn't believe that. but I've lived a long life and I've seen a lot, and I know now that that's true. And so it takes a balanced approach to it, and treatment, and I always tell people, rather than just always saying we're a nation of laws, we should be a nation of grace, and there should be a place for grace and forgiveness in there. And so we have our books are. They told me to Ghostly Shaded Pale. This lady told me, she said, I sent them into Parchment. They're favorites. Everybody loves them. I said, well, that's great. And I had a lady Sunday ask me to write her son who's in prison, and so it's a complicated world, and hopefully I make some sense of it. If y'all have read the books or haven't, if you get into it and follow them all the way to the end, I think you'll not only be entertained, but I think you'll go, wow, I didn't know that. Wow, I didn't know that. And I've known so many politicians in my life, presidents and senators, congressmen, ambassadors. It's a treacherous world. I used to fly in and out of D.C. a lot. So many of them look at you, say what you want to hear, pray with you. Once they got your vote and your money, the minute you're out of the office, they mock you. They do, and I tell you, it's a rented world. I tell you exactly how it is in Washington and Congress. I lay it all out there out of my experiences and how corrupt and how manipulative it is, and it's a wonder we survive. But that's our mission that we're on, and I think if y'all get in there, I think you'll like it. Most of the reviews are so good, and people say it's so visual. The books are so visual. It's like reading a movie. And when I finished the first draft of Ghostly, I hated it, the first draft, and then I went back after a while, and the Lord showed me what to do, and I went from page 1 to the end, adding descriptors to every scene, to describing the people, what they were seeing, what they were hearing, what they were feeling, and they began to pop up off the page and begin to breathe and live and everything. And so my wife's fond of telling people, she said, when Michael is driving down the dirt roads in Mississippi, you can taste the dirt. And that's what every writer wants to aim for. And that's what the common thread in most all of our reviews and everything. So if y'all don't have any more questions, I know I'm running long, but I enjoyed being. I'm fine? Yeah. Anybody got anything on your?
Let me ask you one.
Okay.
Are you afraid of your life that somebody might come now and try to kill you or something like that?
No, not from the gangsters. My first publisher was kind of worried about that, and I said, well, most of those people who might object, if they recognize themselves, they're no longer with us, either by natural or unnatural means, for the lifestyle that they led. A lot of them were assassinated or whatever, but a lot of people, when Ghostly first came out, a lot of people in Tupelo, a lot of them wrote me, called me of my age or older, and they said, I think I know who this was, I think I know who that was, and usually they were right. And so no, I'm not worried about that at all. I'm not afraid of anything. God took all fear from me. I absolutely fear nothing. He took fear and he took hate from me. I hate no one, even the people who tried to bury me in my life. I could go up to them and look at them and tell them, I love you, I pray for you, and it's a wonderful thing. Carrying all that stuff around with you and just eats you up. It's like a cancer on the inside, the fear and the hate. And I tell people that old saying about, hating somebody is like carrying it around and a cancer and thinking they're going to get sick and you're the sick one. And so don't worry about that. I'm more somewhat concerned is some of the high-level political people that I go after in book 2. That would be more of a concern than the gangsters, because as I say in book 2, Michael finds that the political criminals that come after him are much more dangerous than the organized crime figures who tried to kill him. Matter of fact, they're just choir boys, because the political criminals have the full power of government behind them in what I call the unholy trinity of crime, politics, and business. And I have seen it all, and it's not pretty. Corporate and political corruption. And I'll tell you, when you get a tip that Governor of Mississippi is going to have a midnight visit, and at midnight, limo pulls up out of New Orleans, and it outsteps Carlos Marcello, the most powerful godfather in the country in those days, who many people still believe had some role in the assassination of JFK and RFK, because he hated the Kennedys, especially Bobby, because Bobby deported him one time, dropping him and his henchmen off in the Guatemalan jungles and forced them to walk out or die. And you don't do that to people like Marcello, whose favorite term was, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 are dead. And ruthless guy. And when you see that, and the week before, they sent up the underlings of the mafia family out of New Orleans to wine and dine the lieutenant governor, and setting up the visit with the governor. Yeah, not much surprises you anymore. And when you see so many professional people doing things that are violating their oaths as pharmacists, as medical doctors, and you see police cars, some police cars transporting syringes full of morphine to the governor's mansion. Not much surprises you. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of things I get into in book 2. Well, book 1 and book 2, and then in book 3 I'm writing now. So the political would be more the concern, but I'm not concerned about that. I'm on a mission. Huh?
It gets more scary, doesn't it?
What?
It gets more scarier, doesn't it?
Oh, it does, yeah, oh yeah. And once we have freedom of information requests now filed to get it even deeper of things I hope to include in book 3, about who was involved and look at all the internal memos in the White House and so on. But I got a letter the other day saying, there's so many people in front of you. We're going to get you your request as soon as we can, because I wanted to put them in book 3, use it. And they said, most of we found a lot of data which were probably fit with your freedom of information request. And we figure we can get it to you in 12 years. And that's the games they play. And they pass a law saying you have freedom of information, but then they say, well, we just can't process it. We'll get to you when we can, 12 years. I said, heck, I may not be alive in 12 years, but so that's only concern, but that's not going to stop me. I'm pushing ahead. Anything else? If not, I'll step back. If anybody wants any books, I'll sign them. I think some of y'all brought some books. I'd be glad to sign those too. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Merle.
Thank you.